Well, hello. I'm sure most of you are asking, what is this? We haven't seen the blue car in a while. What's been going on with the blue car? The one that's all nice and pretty. Why hasn't that been in any videos? Not even in the background of anything. Well, they parked it back in August, late July, August, somewhere towards the end of last summer. Or I guess this most recent summer, I should say. Yeah, because the clutch was having growing issues, not just issues, but growing issues. Um, so for a while, what had been happening? Oh, and it'd be an occasional thing. The clutch would need adjusting, and it's a self-adjusting mechanism inside the car. Whenever you feel your clutch is not feeling its best, or you have some sort of reason to believe that it needs adjustment, you simply reach down underneath, quick press the pedal a couple times, and then reach underneath the pedal, pull the pedal up. By pulling up the clutch pedal, you kind of reset to the adjuster, and then it'll, in practically the blink of an eye, it adjust itself, and then you'll typically be a-okay. So this one, I had faced a number of issues building up to this, and it was only, after like the fourth or fifth or sixth step that I noticed, okay, something's wrong here. So let's go back a ways, okay? We had been driving this thing very early on, and then I sat down. It took a few years away from the road. We went and restored, well, not the entire car, but dang near the entire car. The engine bay here is the only ugly part of the car. The whole rest of the thing's nice and pretty. So I touched literally everything on this car except for the transmission. I did everything else. New axle boots, new wheel bearings, new brakes everywhere, new electrical everywhere, new everything everywhere, except me opening up the transmission. I had done literally everything else. So, with that being the only thing I haven't touched, I was using it a bunch, and then I went to a car show, and I had issues with... this was the last part I had changed before I started having clutch issues. I should say the last part I didn't change. So I went to a car show one day, and right before I got there, I was having issues with the engine, and on the way home, it's where the issues had kind of revealed themselves. There's a vent hose that goes from the crankcase up to the top of the valve cover, in this back corner by the flywheel. That had plugged up from years ago, and I never thought to replace the hose. We visually inspected it on the outside, noticed it wasn't cracked, dry rotted, wasn't broken, anything like that. There was nothing we could see from the outside that was concerning. Well, it turned out when I got home from my trip, as soon as I turned the key off, it dumped all of its fluids out the main seals. So I thought, okay, well, now's the perfect time to rebuild it, because it's not going to hold its fluids anymore. Let's rebuild it. So I rebuild it, and I find out that crankcase equalization hose was plugged from poor oil changes, poor tuning, things of that nature. It turned a lot of oil into carbon, and it plugged up that hose. So then the lower crankcase could not equalize its pressure with the valve cover up top. So that was the last part I had to change before I started having transmission issues. So I went and rebuilt the engine, and stuck it back in the car, and I continued driving it for quite a long time. But shortly after I put the new engine in, I was having issues adjusting the clutch. The clutch quadrant was stripped out towards one end of the range. I think towards the actual end of the range, as in like the last couple clicks of adjustment you can get out of it before you need to start replacing parts. That end of the range. So I went and replaced both the plastic quadrant pieces, the plastic quadrant itself, and then the plastic ratcheting pawl that goes on it. Replaced those with a used pair out of a different car, and that had fixed my issues for a while. Fast forward 2-3 years, it had to be adjusted a couple times along the way. Okay, easy enough. Reach underneath the clutch pedal, lift it up. You'll hear it ratchet a couple times, and repeat until it stops doing it. Essentially, is how it goes in a normal basis. So we do that, and it seems all right. So we keep driving it again. About a year goes by, and need to adjust it again. Okay. I mean, it is a new clutch, and by this time we've put a couple thousand miles on it. Enough to change the oil, 2-3 times, I think. So we do that, and another year goes by, and I'm out of room for adjusting the clutch. I'm out of teeth on the clutch, and none of them are stripped. So I'm like, well, what the heck? Okay, well, you know what? For now, until I can sort out what's going on here, I cut up a washer, and I use that washer as a spacer for the cable. Clutch cable, you can insert one between this green and this white plastic piece. It may look yellow in the photo, but green and white plastic pieces. You put a washer in there that shims up your cable, removes some slack. Okay, so that worked great. A week later, I found myself having to do that again. So I added a second washer. But now keep in mind, this was a really busy point in my life. I had just bought our new house, our new property, and it was consuming all of my time away from work. I barely had time to tend to this clutch issue here. And I didn't even have time to go through my other cars, so this one just had to keep going. And it's kind of what it does. This is all reliable. Never left me stranded. So after that, I went, okay, we really need to start looking at this stuff here. So I was able to find 30 minutes in my schedule, either that same night or the next evening, and I dive into it. So I'm looking around underneath, and I see that my clutch cable had frayed a whole bunch, because it's a braided cable, kind of like a bicycle brake cable or a motorcycle clutch cable. And it was a number of those a number of strands in that braids were all snapped, to the point it was only holding on by 2 little strands within a thick strand out of, I think it's like 6 or 7 multi-strands. So out of about, we'll say 20, 21, 28 actual strands of metal, is only held on by 2. It's like, oh, okay, that's probably my issue here. So tell you what, we'll change out that cable, and we'll remove my washers, because I shouldn't need them anymore. Obviously, this cable is stretching and fraying. So I changed out the cable, and we were great for about half an hour. Half an hour. I moved from the old house to the new house. Along the way, I hit one stop sign after the second or third time using the clutch in that little drive. I could feel the clutch kind of kick down closer to the floor. I'm like, oh, nope. And I kind of limped it the last 2 miles here home. And then ever since that, I'd parked it. So this final event had occurred late summer last year. So we want to see it, 2024. So I thought, well, crud, I think I know what's going on here. So I pop the hood, and I see that it's not present here right now. There is a pin that goes way down in here. It's what I call the pivot pin for the throwout bearing, and on top is a metal flag, a lever, and it attaches to the clutch cable here. And in normal healthy form, it would be way out here, potentially even like this. But mine, for it to work, it was way like this, and it still wasn't, fully disengaging the clutch, or engaging it, however you want to say. It wasn't fully decoupling power. So I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? Whatever issue I have, it's inside this bell housing, whether it's the transmission, the throwout bearing, or something to do with the throwout bearing fork and or pivot shaft and or the bell housing itself, the journals and or bores inside of it. So we park it, and I knew I'd come back to it sometime this year. Well, we are now at, what's the day today? Oh, sometime this year. That's the day today. So today, we took the engine out. That was a little bit of a chore, but it goes as quick as it always does for me, roughly an hour's time. If I were to clean up a couple of these coolant lines, I could greatly improve that time. But all in all, I got zero complaints. Went pretty easy. The only chore was because of all of my coolant lines. For some reason, this car just has them all routed kind of funny. I think the 82 AC cars are just like that. We spilt a whole bunch of coolant that I have to clean up when this car rolls out of this garage tomorrow. But then I can start driving the car. So, anywho, the engine came out, and as soon as we got it out, I could finally investigate the issue here. So, what had happened? Well, like I said, what goes through the bell housing is this lever that attaches to the clutch cable right here. And this lever is welded onto this pivot shaft. I could see from the top side, well, that weld isn't broken, and nothing is bent or twisted or mangled or broken on the top side. So I'm going to assume that the shaft is still connected to the lever, and it was. But one thing I noticed is while it was in there, I could hold the fork in the throwout bearing, actually, because there would be the throwout bearing placed on this. Where's that hiding? We can show you real quick. Here we go. So the throwout bearing would be placed on our fork set like so. There we go. So when I held the bearing with one hand, I could try turning the shaft with the other hand, and that's where I immediately realized where the issue was. I knew that this throwout bearing fork is bolted to the shaft. Well, there was a good amount of slop where this bolt was. The fork was twisting on the shaft, and it's not supposed to do that at all. There's supposed to be a bolt that goes through here to prevent that event from occurring. So what's that supposed to look like, you may say? Well, let's go show you on a fully assembled engine here. That's the key word here today, fully assembled. Pardon my steps. Dig my storage. Oh yeah, rack mount the world. So here, let's go down to one of these transmissions here. You can barely see what's going on. Good lordy. Let's try to fix that here. Turn up the brightness best I can, I guess. Alright, so you can see the throwout bearing here, and you can't quite see the shaft. It's mostly because of how greasy and grimy it is in here. But there is, oops. Here we go. Here's a brighter example. You can actually see what's going on if I'm not casting a shadow in there. So up in here, you can actually see the head of a bolt right here. So that goes through the fork and threads into the shaft. So the fork itself just has a large hole, and the shaft itself it has a threaded hole for that bolt, and then the back half of that fork has a teeny tiny hole that the bolt could never fit through. Well, so what happened next was I just disassembled it. I removed the bolt, and that's when I found out the bolt was like this, and it had been like this for a long time because it's not a fresh break. All this metal on the tip of the bolt would be nice shiny silver, but it's not. It's all dark black like the outside of the bolt. So that had been exposed to minor oxidization, but mostly a lot of oil soaking, because it's kind of wet in that part of the bell housing. Even if you have a pristinely clean engine or engine bay, you're still going to have a little bit of mess inside the bell housing. No matter how clean you think you may have it, there will always be a little bit of mess. So I find out that that bolt is sheared clean off, and just inside the shaft here. So let me disassemble this for you so you can see. So simply pull them apart once the bolt is removed. But so the bolt head goes on this flush surface. That back there is the tiny hole. I had altered it. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is the hole that goes through the shaft, and like I said, it's threaded, but only on the back half. The top half, you can see, is not threaded, but instead is drilled out to a large diameter. This diameter is supposed to fit the shoulder of our fancy broken frickin' bolt. So let's grab that. We all know that shoulders on bolts are supposed to be the diameter of the tips of the threads or larger. So let's set that in here. And the shoulders fit like a glove without me even threading this in here. Matter of fact, I actually could start threading this in. It will get one whole thread in. But you can see that the shoulder fits nice inside this extra large hole. And what little bit of threads are left still threads in and out of there. So we'll set that down. And the threaded half does go through all the way. But what's interesting is the back half of the stock fork. Remember, this is the front half. The machined half has the head of the bolt. This is the back half. It's going to be perfectly round and has a part number. It has a teeny tiny hole that the bolts could never pass through. Never, ever, ever. So, as I look at these and try to figure out what happened, we'll talk about that theory in a minute. We did the following upgrade, and this upgrade is what this video is about. Well, whether you have this failure or not, this upgrade is the solution to your failure, and it is the preventative operation to prevent said failure. So what do we do? Well, it's easy enough, actually. Remember how I said this back side isn't threaded? Well, what we have to do is we will drill that out, and then once we drill it out, we assemble it. So once we have it assembled, just the two pieces for now. Once we have it assembled, we gently thread in our tap, and for these, it's a M8 by 1.25. You gently thread it in, and you just keep gently threading in your tap. Again, this is a bolt, so imagine I'm threading in a tap. Gently thread in your tap until it stops. When it stops is where you'll be contacting the small hole that you need to drill out. Assuming you went and drilled it out to the proper size, you can then take your tap and use your tap. Again, these two pieces have to be connected, and you have to be not messing up the threads of the shaft while you're threading your tap in, so that you can use the existing threads of the shaft to make the tap line up with the threads you're going to cut in the back side of the fork. If you do all of this correctly, when you tighten this down, it will go in amazing. So that's what we're going to do here. You can actually see it in real time. I got a feeling I should be doing this two hands. So then, once you have our tap all the way through, again, you put the tap through as far as you can reach it, and then run it in and out a whole bunch. make it nice and clean. And as long as your fork fits snug to your shaft, there will be zero play here. And that's the case here. Once you remove your tap, you can now put in a little bit of oil. Try to clean out your threads first. Clean out your threads, put in a little bit of oil, thread in your new bolt. Try to make sure your bolt has a shouldered portion for that first bit. If it doesn't, it's probably not too critical, but if you're going to log a lot of miles on it, try to do that. It's going to help your cause. The more metal you can fill that void, the less chance you'll have of this bolt shearing off. A factory bolt you saw was 10.9. I recommend putting in a bolt that's, I think 12.2 is the next common larger rating. So try to go with a 12 point something or better. Again, it's going to be metric. M8 by 125 is the threads. Whatever length you need. I happen to have a couple of these John Deere bolts hanging around, and they fit just perfect, but they're not shouldered, so I need to visit the hardware store, try to get a shouldered one that goes in about halfway through the diameter of that shaft, and of course through the outside casting of this fork here. So we do that, and now we're a-okay. And now that it's threaded all the way through, we are now connecting two parts, two pieces of metal, the shaft and then the fork, through not two contact points like we were before, but three. We now have this bolt going all the way through, and it's threaded into the second piece. So this is substantially stronger than it was before. So now the question is, okay, what made it fail? I think I know what happened there. When I had rebuilt this engine, the engine was out for quite a while. I had gone in, I had pressure washed the whole bell housing, so it would be nice and clean. Because like I said, the main seals on this guy took a big dump, and oil just went everywhere out of both ends. So the whole bell housing was good and wet with oil. And to prove that I had rectified such issue, it's actually really clean down in there now. You can see it's almost entirely shiny. Where it's kind of darker looking, that's just on camera because I don't have much for light down in there. But when I had washed it, I didn't lubricate all the spots I thought I should. I'm pretty sure I had lubricated the shaft, and that's good. That's the main thing. But I'm pretty sure I had neglected to lubricate the inner sleeve of this throwout bearing. This throwout bearing, you can see on the inside, like I said, it's got a sleeve. And this sleeve goes around a collar placed on the input shaft of the transmission. And you can tell just by me trying to get it on, it's somewhat snug of a fit. That whole collar's purpose is to make sure that that throwout bearing isn't getting twisted or bound up or anything. Now right now it feels pretty smooth, but that doesn't mean it's the entire time it was operating. I've noticed on a few of my loose transmissions, because when this transmission is not hooked up to anything, eventually that collar that the throwout bearing sleeve rides against will get dirty and rusty. Anytime you have any amount of grit here, it's going to make it harder for the throwout bearing to slide in and out. And same thing if you have any issues with the shaft. If the shaft isn't well lubed, or if you're missing the little plastic pin that connects the throwout bearing to the fork, you can substitute that for a few other things. Use your discretion. But any levels of friction you have in here will equate to that throwout bearing not trying to get down the input shaft. And if that happens, that means that you're trying to bind, well, you're not trying to bind, but your efforts in trying to use the clutch are making these two parts bind. Something somewhere along the line is going to give, whether it's your throwout bearing, your pressure plate of the clutch itself, the fingers, those conular fingers, It could be the fork. It could be the pivot arm. It could be the bolt that goes between them. It could be the top lever that you bend. It could be the cable that you stretch for brake. It could be the clutch quadrant that you strip or break. Again, it could be the pedal, the clutch pedal that you again bend or break. There's a lot of things that could, be forced to give, and that's what will happen. But you can see it actually moves along here pretty decent. But that's right now. Earlier, before I took this off, it wasn't moving all that great. So I'm thinking this had just gotten too dry, and you see it's very, very silver shiny. It's not supposed to be. I mean, there's going to be a little bit because it is, there is a lot of friction material in the clutch. So if you get a lot of miles on your clutch, use it a bunch, you're going to see essentially brake dust inside the bell housing. And then a little bit of metal that the sleeve shaves off, riding against that collar. But it wasn't as oily as it looks, and I'm thinking that was probably my issue. So that's something I'll have to keep in mind as I do all these projects. Now, I had just finished putting the engine in the silver EXP, and I had made sure that this was still well lubed. And I had even tried it out before and after the engine install, and yeah, it's got my stamp of approval. It's A1. It won't get any better than perfect. So that's that. But wanted to share this whole debacle because the repair is a really good repair and it's a really good upgrade. If you have any questions or comments or stories relating to this, feel free to share them. I do read them. And keep an eye out for more updates real soon. We got a lot, believe me. Thanks, everybody.